Canada has more to offer than any country in the world.
Countries which engage the world, which trade with the world, compete with the world, innovate, develop, and in the end are more secure, more prosperous.
The opportunities are extraordinary and the sky's the limit.
We've got all the ingredients. All we have to do is be imaginative and see globalization as an opportunity rather than a threat.
In an era of ever-increasing economic, industrial, and financial integration, there's an obvious place for the flexible and open politics of countries like Canada. Inclusive, diverse, and socially conscious, few countries are as readily adaptable to the challenges of globalization. While Canada is hardly the world's greatest economic power, our exports account for a higher percentage of the GDP than any other G8 nation. And this experience as a significant trading nation will serve the country well in ongoing global trade negotiations. Over the next few minutes, you'll hear the opinions and insights of some of the people closest to the global trade issue. They come from a variety of backgrounds, political, commercial, and economic. And while they may have not reached a consensus on how or what Canada can achieve through global trade negotiations, they all agree that our presence at those talks is crucial. Only by participating can we expect to benefit from the opportunities globalization presents. Only by being involved can we exercise leadership on the world stage and ensure the emergence of a fair and equitable interdependent world.
It's very important for Canada to participate in trade talks internationally, because obviously if we don't voice our opinions, then we can't assume that people will automatically understand what our point of view would have been.
Global trade has a huge impact on the average Canadian. Our standard of living depends on trade to a much greater degree than most other countries. Almost half of our GDP now comes from foreign trade. So that what that means in terms of someone's income, it means that almost half the standard of living that we have is because we're able as a country to sell things to other people.
Why globalize? Well, our reliance on foreign trade illustrates that, effectively, we're global already. In the past decade or so, the lowering of barriers has created new opportunities, and Canadian businesses have taken to international trade with growing enthusiasm and increasing skill.
We export approximately 89% of our sales, and I think you can roughly translate that into saying that 89% of the workforce, and the workforce is approximately 1,000 people, are working on export products. If the export markets either were restricted or disappeared, the company would either be downsized severely or wouldn't exist, and the employment along with it. And as I said before, we employ approximately 1,000 people, and I think if you looked across Canada, there's probably a couple of thousand companies like ours, and of course the effect on employment and prosperity would be reflected in all those companies.
The advantages that a company like ours has in international trade are very clear. 98% of our business is export-oriented. In other words, we just couldn't survive if we were focusing simply on the Canadian marketplace. So the world market provides us with extraordinary opportunities for growth.
The chemical industry is about a $30 billion industry in Canada. 55% of that production is traded. So in fact, without trade, we would be a shadow of what we are as an industry. Almost all new investments in this country are 80% dependent on trade. In other words, you cannot build major production facilities today without being able to sell your product abroad.
These companies, and others like them, recognize that Canada is a relatively small country. They see access to a larger consumer base as crucial to survival and growth, whether they're developing prefab housing, motion pictures, or software.
We do not have here the domestic market that is big enough to develop all these products, to give a researcher the incentive to develop an idea further. You need the wider market where this idea can be either sold or where the product resulting from this idea can be sold and developed.
We cannot grow our businesses in a 30 million person marketplace. The economies of scale and scope are just not here. And in order for us to provide good jobs here in Canada, we're going to have to access the international marketplace.
The US is 10 times as big as we are. Europe's probably 8 or 9 times as big as we are. Japan, I'm not sure, but is much larger than we are.
In global terms, Canada's economy is relatively small and provides a compelling reason to favor the protection of an effective, transparent, and accountable multilateral trade framework. In fact, one of Canada's primary goals in global trade negotiations is to participate in the development of clear rules to govern international trade. Rules that will be verified and guided by democratic powers. Rules that will impose a responsible vision.
If we didn't have a rules-based system, we would end up resolving any differences that arose on the basis of politics, on the basis of economic strength.
Open trade and open markets and a rules-based system is a very important part of a better world order because it implies openness, transparency, an end to corruption, an end to special privilege, favors, cronyism, all the things that we would regard as bad things.
I think that Canadians need to appreciate that Canada has taken a leadership role in trade negotiations, and that there are many countries who look to us to have a vocal and articulate voice at the trade negotiation table.
Perhaps the keenest insights into Canada's place in global trade can be found with those who do business with Canada on a day-to-day basis, who respect Canada as a trading partner and recognize the quality and success of exported Canadian goods and services.
Canada's big advantage is that its society makes it open to the world, and Australia's is very similar in that respect. It comes with a confidence that it can perform well in almost any sector of the economy. It comes with an ability to credibly contribute to international discussion. In terms of international trade negotiations, it has had many people involved who've been respected for their expertise and for their tenacity. As an international trading country, it comes with a reputation for integrity and an ability to deliver on what it does and says. Both of those are great assets.
Certainly, we would expect that Canada, as we have always expected, would somehow or the other bridge the gap between the smaller economies and the smaller economy countries and the larger economy countries in terms of these negotiations, so that the outcome can be fair and equitable to all parties.
Developing countries comprise about 80% of the World Trade Organization membership, a formidable bloc. Many of these countries are intimidated by the demands of the American, Asian, and European trading giants. Canada, on the other hand, is seen as an attractive alternative. Our small but sophisticated population base is an ideal proving ground for their products and services, creating demands that do not threaten to outstrip the production capacities of these nations.
So I really believe Canada has a medium-sized economy that makes it an interesting economy to approach. I think that's a strength in the sense that it's not seen as a huge economy. So I believe in that sense that the strength of Canada for the trade, from the trade perspective only, it's a very approachable. You are not fighting against huge conglomerates, nor you are trying to sell in huge markets. And the country's image in the world, at least in Central America, is seen as an interesting country to buy and sell products from.
It's a lot easier to sell product when you have Canada's name behind you. It's a huge amount of power. The cleanliness that comes with the name, the integrity, everything that you're saying, there's no question about it. It's an honor to just be able to say that, you know, you're from Canada and you know, you're 100% Canadian owned, and you know, it's almost like an immediate trust.
The trust and respect our country enjoys internationally are cornerstones of the Canadian advantage in any trade talks. But it is the unique makeup of Canada, the particular formula of our country's creation and evolution, that predisposes Canada to success in global trade negotiations.
If I could personalize it, I'm the youngest of 5 children in a very fractious family. And I had to learn at an early age how to survive by determining exactly what my brothers and sister wanted and somehow delivering it while meeting my own needs. And that's very much, I think, in the Canadian character, because in our international dealings. Because we've been dominated throughout our history by Britain or France very early on, and then later by the United States, we had to learn how to look behind what the others were saying, find what they really need, and then find ways to deliver it that meet our needs as well. But this, of course, gives us considerable strength, because then we get a chance. The one who holds the pen influences a little bit the outcome.
As Canadians, we've embraced diversity and we maintain a passionate respect for a civil society. Our country was founded on principles of accommodation and openness to differences. So it may be that our success in subsequent trade negotiations will be closely tied to our ability to appreciate the value of our international makeup and rich cultural mosaic. It may be that Canada must become even more Canadian to succeed globally.
Well, first, the diversity of Canada's trade correlates quite nicely, I think, with the growing multicultural nature of our society. People who move to Canada create trade links with countries where they have come from, and that is one of the ways in which Canada has built trade links with countries where they were very, very small or based on traditional products in the past.
So we're used to acting internationally. We're bilingual officially, we're multilingual in reality, we're multicultural. It's easy for many Canadians to make international connections because they have cultural links, they have family links, they have linguistic links. We're also, in terms of the new technologies, Canada's one of the best wired countries in the world. Our decision makers have been prudent and forward-looking in terms of providing the infrastructure that we really need for a modern economy.
Firm and equitable global trade rules are needed to preserve society's freedom of action, to safeguard the balance between entrepreneurial spirit and community responsibility. Canada has proven that balance can be struck. By respecting private interests and government involvement, we have forged a caring society, as our commitment to health care and social services proves. It is a model worth considering for global economic governance, one that ensures commerce with a conscience. The economy, after all, is closely tied to such issues as the environment and to labor and social conditions. It fulfills a human purpose. It has a human face.
I think the fact that Canadians have a very strong view about the environment, have a very strong view about social programs, have a very strong view about their identity, that we do have some credibility in these negotiations, talking about these issues in a very direct way with other countries. These are not interests that are at odds with freer trade. These interests must be made harmonious with freer trade, because that's also a very, very important objective of Canada. We seek, if you will, we seek prosperity, and we also seek the common good.
I think the biggest error is to think that the WTO can solve all problems in the global economy. It's a rules-based institution that was founded for the purpose of improving the international trade regime. It was not founded as a panacea for all the international global problems. In fact, we were chatting this morning about this issue, and I think we need to look across the other international organizations to make sure they are equipped to deal with an increasingly integrated global world. We need to look at the International Labour Organization. We need to look at the UN environmental programs to see where and how they can help adapt to an ever increasingly integrated economy.
I think what we can do is ensure that trade doesn't occur in such a way that countries feel, for some reason, that in order to be more competitive in an environment that is more trade intensive, that somehow they have, in order, for example, to attract business, to lower their environmental standards, to lower their labor standards. As a matter of fact, historically, it is not the case that countries that become more trade intensive lower their standards. They tend to raise them.
Trade policy is, as far as I'm concerned, an important and an essential element of foreign trade, foreign policy in general. To take one example, helping the development of developing countries is one important element of Canada's trade policy, and in that sense, allowing for the development of trade rules, a trade regime that will facilitate the participation of developing countries in trade en general is a very, very important aspect of trade policy that can be used to support foreign policy en general.
Global trade negotiations give Canada the opportunity to pave the way for the export not only of our goods and services, but of our values as well. We recognize there are cultural, social, environmental, human rights, and other dimensions to a global trade regime. Combined, they provide compelling evidence of an evolving forum for the governance of the world's economy. They are proof that, as Canadians, we must view international trade as but one facet of a comprehensive foreign policy, a policy that seeks to encourage good government throughout the world.
It's probably a good idea for everybody who is interested in economic issues and broader public issues to reflect a little bit on the role of trade in their daily life, literally, in terms of the products that we purchase, in terms of the jobs that we have that are ultimately related to trade, and to think, now how can I improve the situation? What if I had to negotiate trade rules, understanding that there is always a quid pro quo between countries? What would be my acceptable bargaining position?
In the past, trade has been fundamentally important to Canada's development and prosperity. Ongoing international trade negotiations challenge all Canadians to work together, to realize the vision and create the trading climate in which Canadians can continue to prosper.